1.
Wolves have an interesting way of raising their young. When a female wolf is ready to give birth, she digs a hole. Within this hole, she has her babies. While she is taking care of these babies, other wolves bring her food. After they get a little older, the mother can leave them while she goes off to hunt with other members of the group. Then, instead of the mother, another female will stay behind to guard the young wolves.
2. Green tea has a long history in Japan and strong ties with Japanese culture. Because of this, one might think that green tea comes from a plant unique to Japan. However, all tea, no matter what its color or taste, comes from the same plant. Then what causes the differences in taste and color? They are, in fact, the result of different ways of growing the tea and treating it after it is picked. 3. Physical gestures may have different meanings in different cultures, and misunderstanding these signals can sometimes be embarrassing. I once had an experience which I have never forgotten. Some years ago, I took a small group of foreign students to Kyoto. I counted them with the index finger, which is common in Japan. But one of them became quiet and looked puzzled. When I asked him what was the matter, he replied, "In my country, we count people with our eyes. We use our fingers to count pigs." 4. Vitamin C plays an important role in keeping us healthy. Most mammals produce it in their livers, so they never suffer from a lack of it. Curiously, however, some mammals, such as humans and apes, cannot do so. What happens when you lack this important vitamin? You might see black and blue marks on your skin. Your teeth could suffer too. The pink area around them might become soft and bleed easily. These are just a couple of good reasons to eat plenty of fresh fruit. 5.
The word drug means anything that, even in small amounts, produces changes in the body, the mind, or both. This definition, however, does not clearly separate drugs from what we usually think of as food. The difference between a drug and a poison is also unclear. All drugs become poisons in large amounts, and many poisons are useful drugs in carefully controlled amounts. Is alcohol, for instance, a food, a drug, or a poison? It can be any of the three, depending on how we use it.
6.
Have you ever thought about what skin does for us? Most of us are aware that skin protects us from liquid, heat, cold, dirt, and bacteria. But that is not its only job. For instance, the skin is where our bodies make the vitamin D that we need. Another function has to do with the sense of touch. Without that sense, we could not feel any difference between rough and smooth surfaces. Skin can even help us determine if someone is sick. The wrong color, slightly gray or very pale, may be a sign of disease. Skin may reflect a person's mental state too. Unusual sweating, for example, may be a sign that a person is nervous or under stress.
7.
Western clothes have buttons on the right for men. This is convenient because the majority of men are right-handed. It is easier for them to use the right hand when buttoning up. Why then do women's clothes have buttons on the left, even though most women are also right-handed? Is this a kind of discrimination? In fact, there is a reason why women's buttons are on that side. In the past, buttons were quite expensive, and only very rich people could afford them. Women in such wealthy families had servants who dressed them. Therefore, to make it easier for the servants, buttons were put on the left.
8. The color purple has often been regarded as a symbol of wealth and power, but the dye used to produce it did not have an elegant beginning. An ancient people living along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea first discovered how to make the dye from murex snails, small sea animals with hard shells. Unlike other snails, murex snails give off a strong-smelling liquid that changes color when it comes into contact with air and light. From this liquid, the people produced the purple dye. If we visit the places where the dye was produced, we might still be able to see the shells of murex snails. Let us hope we cannot smell them. 9.
The smile may no longer be an effective way to mask one's true feelings. Some psychologists have claimed that true smiles and false smiles use different muscles. For example, in the true smile, the muscles surrounding the eyes tighten, while the cheek muscles pull the corners of the lips upward. On the other hand, in the false smile, the muscles between the eyebrows move slightly, while the muscles around the mouth pull the corners of the lips downward. If the psychologist's claim is proven to be true, perhaps people will worry less about what they say and more about which muscles to use when they smile.
10. When English-speaking people talk about hot food, are they saying the food is spicy like curry? Or are they talking about its temperature, as in hot coffee? These two different meanings of hot may seem confusing to Japanese students. But as a matter of fact, the word is the right one for describing the way the body responds to spice and heat. A simple explanation would go something like this. When we eat or drink, the same nerves in the mouth react both to spicy chemicals in the food and to a rise in temperature. The English expression, therefore, reflects this fact about the human body. 11. People today are worried about food safety. As a result, the popularity of organic farming of fruits and vegetables is increasing. But what exactly does organic farming mean? It is probably easier to explain what organic farming is not. Organic farming does not use pesticides or fertilizers. Instead, this style of farming uses natural methods to protect plants and help them grow. So, organic agricultural products are thought to be generally safer than non-organic ones. In the United States, about 2% of all food is grown using organic methods. The U.S. government officially licenses farms as organic if they pass an examination. Presently, there are about 10,000 licensed farmers in the U.S., and this number is growing by about 20% a year. 12. In addition to food safety, another reason for the popularity of organic fruits and vegetables is that they taste better. This is why many restaurants only buy organic products. A lot of people think organic farming is not competitive compared to other methods because it cannot grow the same quantity of food. However, new research has shown that organic farming only grows on average about 5% less than non-organic methods. Still, organic food today is more expensive than non-organic food. But when the environmental and health costs of non-organic farming are considered, such as the pollution of water by pesticides, most people would agree that the higher price of organic farming is in fact a small price to pay for our health and safety. 13.
The knowledge of mathematics developed rapidly in Europe and North America after the Industrial Revolution. But the study of mathematics was carried out many centuries before in other countries, like China. Over 2,000 years ago, the Chinese began their study of numbers, mostly related to astronomy and the perfection of a calendar. Already as early as 200 BC, they had written a textbook on mathematics that was called The 9 Chapters on the Mathematical Art. Interestingly, the ideas in this book seem to have been developed in China without any influence from Europe or other regions.
14.
Various other books on mathematics appeared in the following centuries. But by the 5th century, it seems that the Chinese already had the concept of negative numbers and perhaps also had the concept of zero. Around the 13th century, Chinese mathematicians were solving equations using methods that Europeans would not discover until 500 years later. Unfortunately, near the end of the 14th century, the leaders of China began to be critical of math and science. Because of this change in attitude, people turned away from the study of math to study plants and medicine instead. It wasn't until the 19th century that the Chinese would become interested in math again, but this time under the influence of European mathematical knowledge.
15. Genes, the basic parts of cells which are passed down from parents to children, may have something to do with human behavior. In an experiment, scientists put flies into a glass tube and placed a light at the end of it. Some of the flies began flying toward the light, some began walking, and some did not move at all. On the basis of the flies' actions, they were separated into different groups. Flies that love light, flies that like light, and flies that like the dark. The researchers found that these three groups of flies had variations in a particular set of genes. This suggested to the researchers that the variations in these genes might explain the differences in the flies' behaviors. If genes influence behaviors in flies, why not in humans too? 16.
Ben Hemmons is the father of 3 children, including 4-year-old Sophie. According to medical experts, it is normal for kids around this age to catch colds 4 to 5 times a year. In adults, the ratio is about 2 to 3 times a year for reasons that are not completely clear. However, says Dr. Ranit Mishori of Georgetown University Hospital, many people believe that it is possible to become immune to the common cold so that one gets fewer and fewer colds as he ages. There are about 200 types of virus that cause the common cold, yet people think that once you get infected one time, you develop immunity for the rest of your life. This is entirely wrong, she claims. There are simply too many different viruses, many of which change in slight ways as they pass from person to person.
17.
English is a language with an enormous number of words, but how many English words are there? Most dictionaries used by college students have about 200,000 words, while most full-length dictionaries have about 300,000 to 600,000. Meanwhile, an organization called the Global Language Monitor positively claims that there are exactly 1,019,729 English words. But counting the number of words in English is not an easy task. First of all, many words that we use in English today were originally words in other languages. Should the words sushi or tsunami be considered English words now that they are frequently used? Then there is the question of words that were used centuries ago but are no longer used today. Should they be counted too? What about words that are only used in certain regions of a country?
18.
And the list of questions goes on. Should we count the verb, the adjective, the noun, and other forms of a word as separate words? In other words, would drive, driving, and driver be counted as separate words? Should a compound word be counted as one word, or should each of the words in it be counted separately? How about the huge number of technical and scientific terms? Finally, to add to the difficulties of counting words, we need to consider new words that are being created all the time. The constantly changing nature of language is frustrating for anyone trying to count words. But this is also what makes language so interesting. English, like other languages, always offers something new to learn.
19. Traditions and customs based on superstitions and religion have been an important aspect of weddings in all cultures. They vary greatly from one country to another, and sometimes even between different ethnic groups in a particular country. Though many traditions and customs have been forgotten through the years, many of today's wedding ceremonies have their beginnings in ancient beliefs and customs that originated in medieval times. In a Christian wedding, the bride usually wears a white wedding gown to show that she is pure. White was a color that was once believed to keep evil spirits away. On the other hand, in Hinduism, white signifies the color of death. A Hindu bride usually wears a red dress with gold stitching. In China, both the bride and groom are dressed in red, which is a color associated with celebration and good fortune. 20. In many cultures, after the wedding, it is traditional for the groom to carry the bride over the threshold of their new home. This custom originated from the belief that bad luck may fall on the bride if she enters a new home with her left foot first. The custom of throwing rice or flowers at the newly married couple to wish them fertility and prosperity originated in Asia and later became popular in America. At a traditional Japanese wedding, it is considered unlucky to use words like cut, separate, or leave. Though weddings in many parts of the world still continue to be rituals that reflect ethnic, cultural, and social backgrounds, contemporary weddings incorporate more meaningful customs better suited to today's values. 21.
When we watch kittens and puppies playing, we realize that through play they are learning how to live. They learn various physical skills, such as how to jump over barriers without getting hurt. They also learn social interaction. For example, if a kitten bites his sister too hard, she will get angry and bite him back. These physical and social skills form part of the training that young animals need in order to grow up. Just as kittens and puppies learn about how to live through play, so do children. But in present-day Japan, especially in cities, there is not much space for children to play in. Children need to release their energy for their mental and physical health. They need space, especially outdoors, so that they can run, jump, and yell.
22.
Another point to consider is how much time children have to play. Some people say that 4 to 5 hours a day of playing outdoors with others is necessary, even for 12-year-olds. It is very doubtful, however, whether any Japanese children get that much free time. Concerned about their future in an increasingly competitive society, parents generally tell their children to study more. Very few would tell them to go out and play. What do these children do at home when they are not studying? They tend to spend time by themselves. They play video games or watch TV, for instance. These activities do not teach them how to get along with others. This can only be learned through playing with other children. They need to play without being told what to do by adults in order to learn about leadership and group harmony on their own. Outdoor space is particularly suitable for this purpose. Children need a proper outdoor environment where they can freely spend their time playing with friends.
23. There is much debate on the origin of the game of football. The Japanese and Chinese claim to have invented a sport similar to modern soccer many centuries ago. In comparison to modern soccer, the Japanese game of kemari was a game that used a large ball stuffed with sawdust. This version used a field which was set up by choosing 4 trees. These trees were usually cherry, maple, pine, and willow. Many large houses in Japan would grow these trees to make a field for kemari. Kemari was normally played with 2 to 12 players. China's version, tsuchu, involved players hitting a leather fur-stuffed ball into a small hole. As in soccer, no player could use his hands during play. It was considered an honor to be part of a team. The first international soccer or tsuchu match is believed to have been held in China around 50 BC. 24. The emperor of the Han Dynasty was an avid early player and fan of tsuchu. This spread the popularity of tsuchu all over China. Some people in China claim that it is even possible tsuchu could go back to 5000 BC. The British claim that soccer was created in the 8th century in Britain. It was not a recreational sport at the time, but a war game. It was a violent game, and serious injury and even death were not uncommon. It was not until 1815, when Eton College set up a series of rules for the game, that it became a less violent sport. At that time, colleges began to play using similar rules. In 1848, the rules were set by Cambridge University. In the Cambridge rules, shin kicking and carrying the ball were forbidden. This is where rugby and soccer developed into 2 different sports. 25.
A fly can do one thing extremely well: fly. Recently, a team of British scientists declared that the common housefly is the most talented aerodynamicist on the planet, superior to any bird, bat, or bee. A housefly can make 6 turns a second, hover, fly straight up, down, or backward, land on the ceiling, and perform various other show-off maneuvers. And it has a brain smaller than a sesame seed. Michael Dickinson, who studies fly flight in his lab at the California Institute of Technology, says the housefly isn't actually the best flyer. Hoverflies are the be-all and end-all, he says. They can hover in one spot, dash to another location, and then race back to their original hovering point precisely. Scientists, engineers, and military researchers want to know how creatures with such small brains can do that. Maybe they could reverse engineer a fly to make a robotic device that could reconnoiter dangerous places, such as earthquake zones or collapsed mines.
26.
Dickinson's laboratory works with fruit flies. Researchers put them in chambers and manipulate the visual field, filming the flies in super slow motion, 6,000 frames a second. Dickinson is interested in knowing how flies avoid collisions. He has found that certain patterns, such as 90-degree turns, are triggered by visual cues and 2 equilibrium organs on their backs that function like a gyroscope. Flies have only a dozen muscles for maneuvering, but they're loaded with sensors. In addition to their compound eyes, which permit panoramic imagery and are excellent at detecting motion, they have wind-sensitive hairs and antennae. They also have 3 light sensors on the tops of their heads, which tell them which way is up. Roughly 2/3 of a fly's entire nervous system is devoted to processing visual images. They take all this sensory data and boil it down to a few basic commands, such as go left and go right.
27. The past 30 to 40 years have seen a huge increase in the number of children who suffer from allergies, and scientists are still looking for the explanation. Some have blamed increased air pollution, but it has also been found that allergies are common not only among children in the city, but also among children in the countryside, where pollution is typically much lower. A currently popular explanation for the rise in allergies is the so-called hygiene hypothesis. The basic idea is that young children brought up in an environment which is too clean are more at risk of developing allergies. Nowadays, people bathe and wash their clothes more frequently than in the past, and thanks to vacuum cleaners, homes are less dusty too. One result of all these changes is that in their early lives, children are exposed to fewer allergens, substances that can cause allergies, and this means that their bodies cannot build up natural immunity to them. Simply put, exposure to allergy-causing substances is necessary for natural protection against them to develop. 28. The trend towards smaller families also means that young children encounter fewer allergens in the home. In fact, it is known that children who have older brothers and sisters are more resistant to allergies. The same is true of children who share their home with a pet. Such children are much less likely to develop the very common allergy to cat or dog hair, for example. Scientists agree that being exposed to a wider range of allergens early in life helps children to develop greater immunity. There is, however, also some data suggesting that genetics, family income, and even the parent's level of education may play a part in how likely a child is to suffer from allergies. Thus, although the hygiene hypothesis is an important area for research, we cannot yet be sure that too much attention to cleanliness is the only explanation for the enormous rise in the number of allergy victims. 29. People may decide to study foreign languages for various reasons. They may do so for the immediate purpose of satisfying the requirements of some public examination, or of getting greater fun and enjoyment out of a holiday abroad. Business people may have to deal directly or indirectly with various kinds of information from abroad. Research workers may realize the importance of being able to read the latest reports of advances made in their studies as soon as they are published in foreign journals, without waiting for a translator, who may or may not have the ability to make an exact translation with 100% accuracy. People may be keenly interested in the activities of a foreign nation for political reasons. They may need information about current affairs that foreign newspapers and journals alone can deliver. Students of literature must surely be able to read great works firsthand. 30. Learning a new language implies entering a new world, and it inevitably leads to a widening of intellectual experience. Learning a new language well enough to be able to understand it when heard, to speak it, read it, and write it, is such hard training that we certainly need some strong urge to drive us on. The 4 distinct and separable activities just mentioned, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, call for constant, preferably daily exercise. These activities are concerned in varying degrees with 4 aspects of language study: pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and idiom. It is useful to keep these 4 activities and 4 aspects clearly in mind. Learning a new language calls for no great originality of mind or critical talent, but it does demand an eager intellectual curiosity and a constant and lively interest in the endless ways in which human ideas may be expressed. It demands quick observation, first of all, reasonable ability to mimic and imitate, good powers of association and generalization, and a good memory. 31.
On April 4, 2003, Glenn Keane, one of Walt Disney's most respected animators, called for a meeting to discuss the war breaking out at the studio. Disney's animators had settled into 2 opposing camps, those who were skilled in computer animation and those who refused to give up their pencils. Keane, a 31-year veteran who created the Beast for Beauty and the Beast and Ariel for The Little Mermaid, was a Disney traditionalist. But after a series of experiments to see whether he could create a computer-animated ballerina, his opposition softened. So he invited the 50 animators to discuss the pros and cons of both art forms, calling his seminar The Best of Both Worlds.
32.
For an hour, Keane listed the pluses and minuses of each technique while the other animators listened quietly. After a few questions, the crowd burst into chatter as animators shouted over one another, some arguing that computers should not replace people and others expressing fears that they would be forced to draw by hand. In a recent interview, Keane recalled that Kevin Geiger, a computer animation supervisor, then stood up and demanded of him, "If you can do all this cool stuff that you're talking about, that you want to see in animation, but you have to give up the pencil to do it, are you in?" Keane hesitated before answering, "I'm in." 3 weeks later, the company's animators were told that Disney would concentrate on making computer-animated movies, abandoning a 70-year-old hand-drawn tradition in favor of a style popularized by newer and more successful rivals like Pixar Animation Studios and DreamWorks Animation.
33.
The results were nothing short of a cultural revolution at the studio, which is famous for the hand-drawn classics championed by its founder, Walt Disney, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Peter Pan. 2 years and a half after that decision, Disney released Chicken Little, the first of 4 computer-animated films developed at the newly reorganized studio. The company hoped that this movie, along with others like Meet the Robinsons, American Dog, and Keane's Rapunzel Unbraided, would return Disney to its past glory. There was a lot more than pride, however, riding on its success. Animation was once Disney's heart, a profitable lifeline that fed the company's theme park, book, and home video divisions. And restoring profit was as essential to Disney in those days as regaining its reputation.
34. Although cats appear to perform most actions instinctively, they also seem to react to human behavior and adapt themselves to it. For instance, some cats behave as if they understood their owner's feelings. One cat owner told of the time when she lay crying and exhausted on her bed, and her cat put its front legs around her head and comforted her. Cats also sometimes appear to be able to understand the function of many of the things human beings use. For example, some cats, when they bring a captured bird or mouse into the house, put it on a plate or in a dish. There are also cats who know how to open a door by turning the handle. Furthermore, a lot of cats seem to understand what their owners say. A writer tells a story of her cat who used to sleep on top of her word processor. At first, when the cat's tail got in the way of the screen, the owner would push its tail away and say, "Move your tail, please." Eventually, she didn't have to push the tail, but only had to tell the cat to move it. 35.
Touching is the language of physical intimacy. Because of this, touch can be the most powerful of all the communication channels. In May 1985, Bridget Gurney was trapped for 6 hours beneath a collapsed construction crane in New York City. Throughout her ordeal, she held the hand of a rescue worker, who stayed by her side as heavy machinery removed the tons of twisted steel from her crushed legs. A stranger's touch gave her hope and the will to live. Touch appears to affect the sexes differently. Women sometimes react much more favorably to touch than men. In an interesting study, psychologists asked a group of nurses to lightly touch a patient once or twice shortly before the patient underwent surgery. The touching produced a strongly positive reaction, but only among women. It appeared to lower their blood pressure and anxiety levels both before and after surgery. For men, however, the touching proved to be very upsetting. Their blood pressure and anxiety levels both rose. The psychologists suspect that because men are taught to be more stoic, that is, to hide their feelings and to ignore their fears, the touching rattled them by reminding them that life is fragile.
36.
How do you feel about touching and being touched? Salespeople think they know. Research shows that it is harder to say no to someone who touches you when making a request. But not everyone is happy about being touched by a stranger. Think about your own comfort level when you find yourself in a crowd. Are you relaxed and loose, or does physical contact make you feel awkward and tense? In some situations, we can't help touching each other. Take a crowded elevator, for instance. Normally, people stand shoulder to shoulder and arm to arm, accepting such close contact without complaint. The rule seems to be, touch only from shoulder to elbow, but nowhere else. Even though the Japanese are regarded as a non-touching society, their crowded cities force them to be jammed into subways and trains. Edward T. Hall, an anthropologist, says the Japanese handle their uneasiness about being packed into public places by avoiding eye contact and drawing within themselves emotionally, thus touching without feeling.
37.
The Internet is very much like television in that it takes time away from other pursuits, provides entertainment and information, but in no way can compare with the warm personal experience of reading a good book. This is not the only reason why the Internet will never replace books, for books provide the sufficient knowledge of a subject that sitting in front of a computer monitor cannot provide. We can transfer text from an Internet source, but the artistic quality of sheets of transferred text leaves much to be desired. A well-designed book makes the reading experience important. The book is still the most compact and economical means of conveying a lot of knowledge in a convenient package, and this is what makes it popular. The idea that one can carry in one's pocket a play by Shakespeare, a novel by Charles Dickens, or the Bible in a small book with a stiff paper cover is incredible. We take such uncommon convenience for granted, not realizing that the book itself has undergone quite an evolution since the production of the Gutenberg Bible in 1455 and Shakespeare's Book of Plays in 1623.
38.
Not only has the art and craft of printing and making books been greatly improved over the centuries, but the great variety of subject matter now available in books is surprising, to say the least. In fact, the Internet requires the constant entry of authors and their books to obtain the information that makes it a useful tool for research and learning. Another important reason why the Internet will never replace books is because those who wish to become writers want to see their works permanently published as books, something you can hold, see, feel, look through, and read at your leisure without the need for an electric current apart from a lamp. The writer may use a computer instead of a pen and pad, but the finished product must eventually end up as a book if it is to have value to the reading public. The writer may use the internet in the course of researching a subject just as he may use a library for that purpose, but the end product will still be a book.
39.
Why is it that many people who have suffered a major shock, such as divorce or the death of a family member, seem to be weaker against a variety of major and minor illnesses? One common idea among psychologists has been that people could deal with suffering more effectively if they were able to understand and accept it. Indeed, many experts emphasize the value of expressing thoughts and feelings associated with upsetting events. Recently, a team of medical researchers investigated the links between describing psychologically painful events and long-term health. In one experiment, healthy college students were asked to write about either personally disturbing experiences or ordinary topics over a period of 4 days. In the months afterwards, students who had chosen to reveal their inner thoughts and feelings in their writing visited the health center for illness much less often than those who had written about everyday topics.
40.
In an experiment that followed, another group of healthy students were given the 4-day writing exercise. Some chose to write about highly personal and upsetting experiences, including loneliness, problems with family and friends, and death. When questioned immediately afterwards, they stated that they did not feel any better. However, their blood samples taken before and after the experiment showed evidence of an improved resistance to illness. The white cells that fight off bacteria and viruses had increased their reaction and sensitivity to these invaders. This trend continued over the following 6 weeks, when another blood sample was taken. Individuals who showed the best results were those who wrote about topics that they had actively refrained from telling others about. The researchers proposed that failure to face up to painful experience can be a form of stress itself, and can increase the possibility of illness. It follows, then, that actively dealing with a major shock makes possible its understanding and acceptance. The answer is not to suffer in silence. It may not always be possible to talk about personal problems, but writing them down will help the body to fight disease in the long run.
41. The impact of exposure to violent video games has not been studied as extensively as the impact of exposure to TV or movie violence. The researchers write in Psychological Science in the Public Interest. However, on the whole, the results reported for video games to date are very similar to those obtained in the investigations of TV and movie violence. Among the effects of violent game playing are increases in physiological arousal and physically aggressive behavior, such as hitting, kicking, and pulling clothes or hair. Studies also have found a reduction in helpful behavior among youths exposed to violent video games. Males tend to prefer action-oriented video games involving shooting, fighting, sports, action-adventure, fantasy role-playing, and strategy, according to the Michigan State Survey. Females prefer classic board games, trivia quizzes, puzzles, and arcade games. Electronic game playing gets young people involved with technologies and opens up opportunities in high-paying tech careers, notes communications professor Bradley Greenberg of Michigan State. 42. It is believed that these opportunities accrue to boys because they spend more time working with electronic games and computers, says Greenberg. If girls become more involved with technology at an early age, it is likely that the interest in technology will continue into the work world. If females do become more involved in technology fields, including game development, they may create less violent games that promote cooperation rather than aggression. Video games are in 80% of U.S. homes with children. They generated $6 billion in 2000 and $11 billion by 2003. All indications are that the industry will continue to grow at a healthy clip, says Greenberg. The emerging market is for games designed more with girls in mind that engage them for longer periods of time and force them to investigate more the technology behind the games. The next frontier involves transferring video game technology to educational settings and using the young people's fascination with the games to involve them more with innovative teaching technologies. Until that day comes, however, more awareness is needed of the impact of violent games on young people's behavior, Anderson and his colleagues conclude. 43. Beware of those who deliberately use aspects of the truth to deceive you and others. When someone tells you something that is true, but intentionally leaves out important information that should be included for full comprehension on your part to take place, they can create a false impression. For example, an acquaintance might tell you, "I just won $100 in the state lottery, and it was fantastic when I took that $1 ticket back to the store and turned it in for $100. This woman's a winner, right?" Maybe, maybe not. In fact, you later learn that she had purchased not one ticket, but instead 200 for this specific lottery, and only one of these a winner. Eventually, you realize this woman, who you thought was lucky or fortunate, is in fact a huge loser. Although she didn't say anything false, she clearly left out important information and likely did so on purpose. That's called a half-truth, which is not technically a lie, but it's just as dishonest. 44. Untrustworthy candidates in political campaigns often use such deceptive communication strategies to trick voters into supporting them. Let's say that during Governor Smith's last term, her state lost 1 million jobs, but gained 3 million new ones. Then she seeks another term in office and enters the election race. One of her opponents in that race subsequently begins a multimedia advertising campaign saying, "During Governor Smith's term, the state lost 1 million jobs." That is indeed true, but at the same time, it is intentionally deceptive. A more honest statement from her opponent would have been, "During Governor Smith's term, the state had a net gain of 2 million jobs." Advertisers sometimes use half-truths as well. Because it's illegal in many countries to openly make false claims about a product or service, some advertisers try to mislead you with the truth. An ad might consequently boast, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend yucky pills to cure nose pimples. This is also a factual statement, but one which deliberately fails to mention that only 10 doctors were asked about yucky pills, and 9 of these actually work for the Yucky Corporation. 45.
Have you ever noticed the different approaches people use to deal with problems? Some people, individualists, generally try to work through problems on their own. Other people, cooperators, tend to approach problem solving as a group matter. Each approach has positive and negative points. Individualists may often be the quickest to find an answer to a problem, and they tend to be willing to take responsibility. However, this approach is not perfect. They may be too committed to a particular position to be able to change their opinions. In this way, the individualist approach may result in difficulties later. Cooperators are valued as team members, in sports or school or work. They tend to be flexible enough to recognize the importance of other points of view when problems arise. This approach, however, can take a long time, which may lead to delays in solving problems. Such difficulties sometimes cannot be avoided with the cooperator's approach. We should learn to recognize the different approaches to dealing with problems. This knowledge can help us build smoother relations between people with different approaches to problem solving.
46.
In 1983, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Wassily Leontief highlighted the debate through a clever comparison of humans and horses. For many decades, horse labor appeared unaffected by technological change. Even as railroads replaced the stagecoach and the Conestoga wagon, the U.S. horse population grew seemingly without end. The animals were vital not only on farms, but also in the country's rapidly growing urban centers. But then, with the introduction and spread of the powerful and efficient engine, the trend was rapidly reversed. As engines found their way into automobiles in the city and tractors in the countryside, horses became largely irrelevant. Then the question is whether a similar outcome is possible for human labor. Are autonomous machines and supercomputers indicating a coming wave of technological progress that will finally sweep humans out of the economy? For Leontiev, the answer was yes. However, he missed a number of important points. Humans, fortunately, are not horses and remain an important part of the economy.
47.
Alfred Marshall, a British economist, in his foundational 1890 book Principles of Economics, said, "Human wants and desires are countless in number and very various in kind. Ever since Marshall, people have linked unlimited wants to full employment. After all, who else but workers will be able to fulfill all those wants and desires? We humans are a deeply social species, and the desire for human connections carries over to our economic lives. We come together to appreciate human expression or ability when we attend plays and sporting events. Regular customers often visit particular restaurants, not only because of the food and drink, but because of the hospitality offered. In these cases, human interaction is central to the economic transaction, not incidental to it. Humans have economic wants that can be satisfied only by other humans, and that makes us deny that we will go the way of the horse."
48.
You are on your way to a concert. At an intersection, you encounter a group of people all staring at the sky. Without even thinking about it, you look upwards too. Why? Social proof. In the middle of the concert, when the soloist is giving an excellent performance, someone begins to clap, and suddenly the whole room joins in. You do too. Why? Social proof. After the concert, you go to the coat check to pick up your coat. You watch how the people in front of you place a coin on a plate, even though officially the service is included in the ticket price. What do? You probably leave a coin as well. Why? Social proof. Social proof, sometimes roughly termed the herd instinct, dictates that individuals feel they are behaving correctly when they act the same as other people. In other words, if a large number of people follow a certain idea, others will find this idea truer or better. And the more people who display a certain behavior, the more appropriate others will judge it. This is, of course, ridiculous. Social proof is the evil behind economic bubbles and stock market panic. It exists in fashion, management techniques, hobbies, religion, and diets. In some cases, it can even negatively affect whole cultures.
49.
A simple experiment carried out in the 1950s by legendary psychologist Solomon Asch shows how common sense is influenced by peer pressure, the tendency to want to act the same as the members of one social group. In Asch's experiment, a research participant is shown a line drawn on paper, and next to it 3 lines, numbered 1, 2, and 3, one shorter, one longer, and one of the same length as the original one. The participant must indicate which of the 3 lines corresponds to the original one. If that participant is alone in the room, he gives correct answers. Unsurprising, because the task is really quite simple. Now 5 other people enter the room. They are all actors, a fact that the participant does not know. One after another, they give wrong answers, saying number 1, although it's very clear that number 3 is the correct answer. Then it is the participant's turn again. In 1/3 of cases, he will answer incorrectly to match the other people's responses. Why do we act like this?
50.
In the past, following others was a good survival strategy. Suppose that 50,000 years ago, you were traveling in the wild with your hunter-gatherer friends, and suddenly they all fled at the sight of an animal. What would you have done? Would you have remained still, wondering about what you were looking at? Was it a lion, or something that just looked like a lion but was in fact a harmless animal? No, you would have followed your friends. Later on, when you were safe, you could have reflected on what the lion had actually been. Those who acted differently from the group did not pass their genes on to the later generations. We are directly descended from those who copied the other's behavior. This pattern is so deeply rooted in us that we still use it today, even when it offers no survival advantage, which is most of the time. Only a few cases come to mind where social proof is of value. For example, if you find yourself hungry in a foreign city and don't know a good restaurant, it makes sense to pick the one that's full of local people. In other words, you copy the local people's behavior. Comedy and talk shows make use of social proof by inserting sounds of people laughing at key moments, encouraging the audience to laugh along.
51.
Can we create a waste-free society? It would seem like an ideal goal to realize, since mass production has forced a shift in our way of living. Clothes have become fast fashion, worn once and then thrown away like a finished bag of potato chips. Sure, most people will recycle their cans and bottles, but that doesn't alter the fact that we are still throwing away pounds and pounds of waste every day. That will never change in a world where convenience is appreciated over all else. Or will it? Kamikatsu, a small town in Tokushima Prefecture, had been working for years to reduce waste. However, when they learned about zero-waste philosophy, an idea popped into the residents' minds to become the first zero-waste town in Japan. The town doesn't collect domestic waste. Instead, the residents bring their waste to the waste collection site. There, they sort it into 45 very specific and detailed categories. Although some common stuff cannot be recycled, Kamikatsu has been able to recycle more than 80% of its waste. Kamikatsu is also encouraging residents to reuse goods. An area of its waste collection site offers used stuff for free.
52.
Recycling and reusing, however, are not enough to keep our world from becoming swallowed up in waste. Kamikatsu also makes an effort to get people to brush up their understanding of the environment and make society as a whole think, why? Why are you buying or selling the product? Is it good for the environment? Will it become a favorite possession, or will it be thrown away after one use? Whereas before, some believed they had a sacred right to buy or produce whatever they desired, now they realize that their actions affect the world around them. In recent years, Kamikatsu built a complex facility called the Zero Waste Center. A hotel located in the grounds of this facility is run on the understanding that creating a waste-free society applies not only to individuals, but also to businesses. For example, instead of offering an individual soap bar to each guest, it encourages them to cut off the amount of soap they need at the front desk. Fitting into a new strategy is not easy, but through its actions, Kamikatsu is leading the nation in finding ways to gain the prize of a truly waste-free society.
53.
A basic rule of medical science is that no human life should be used for the benefit of another. Some people are against human cloning and related techniques for this reason. In cloning, an egg cell is used to develop ordinary cells. The opponents of cloning insist that this is killing because it destroys the potential of the egg to develop into a human being. Other people oppose cloning because at this stage it is unreliable. In animal experiments, for example, success rates are very low. Still others are concerned about the future that cloning might bring about. They are afraid that cloning will lead to the production of human beings for body parts. They also fear that cloning might lead to attempts to create superior humans.
54.
Not everyone is against human cloning, however. Some people support cloning if it is for the purpose of medical treatment, although they oppose the cloning of babies. The medical benefits of cloning and related techniques, they argue, could be huge. For example, if a heart can be developed from a patient's own cell, the body will not reject it. Furthermore, he or she will not have to wait for someone to die to get a new heart. Supporters claim that the use of such techniques is not killing. Just as ordinary store-bought eggs do not develop into chickens, the eggs used for cloning do not develop into human beings by themselves. They also argue that it is already practically impossible to stop a patient from receiving medical treatment that in some way depends on cloning and related techniques. Even if one country bans cloning, there will always be another country that promotes it. The supporters, therefore, maintain that scientists should have the freedom to experiment and that people should have the freedom to seek life-saving treatments. In other words, they feel that cloning should be continued unless it is clearly shown to be harmful. The debate over this issue is likely to go on for some time.
55.
Harvest Plus, an agricultural research organization, is teaching people around the world how to grow what it calls smart crops. Its project in Mozambique is having surprising effects. In 2006, Harvest Plus workers provided orange sweet potato plants to people in 24 villages in Mozambique. The workers taught these people how to grow the vegetables. They also explained the importance of vitamin A to staying healthy. Farmers in Mozambique had been planting white and yellow sweet potatoes, not the orange-colored ones. The white and yellow potatoes have very little vitamin A. However, one small orange sweet potato has a full day's supply of vitamin A. A lack of vitamin A is dangerous. Without enough vitamin A, you face an increased risk of getting a serious disease or dying from infections. The World Health Organization, WHO, reports that around the world, 190 million young children are not getting enough of this important vitamin in the foods they eat. Economist Alain Debroux is with the International Food Policy Research Institute and was involved with the project. He says about 70% of children there were vitamin A deficient. They were not getting enough vitamin A. About 70% of kids under the age of 5 were vitamin A deficient. So you have this huge need for new solutions. If you can do something through agriculture to increase the amount of vitamin in the diet, you're in much better shape because that's much more sustainable than using vitamin supplements.
56.
Anne Herforth, an expert on global food security and nutrition, calls supplements a short-term solution to a more fundamental problem, which is people not having access to high-quality diets. Mr. Debroux says the potatoes had a surprising effect on the health of children. At the end of the 3-year study, the researchers compared the health of children in villages growing orange sweet potatoes with those not growing them. Children living in the sweet potato villages had 40% fewer cases of diarrhea than other boys and girls. Among children under the age of 3, the difference was 50%. According to Mr. Debroux, showing the effect of a food-growing project on health is very important, or as he says, a big deal. This is a big deal because nobody has shown in the past that an agricultural production intervention can have big health impacts, any health impacts. Experts say that teaching farmers how to grow healthier food is one of the best ways to improve health. Ms. Herforth says the findings do a good job making the link between food production and health. It's important to show that if you produce a food and it's available to people to eat and they like it, then it does good things for health. Harvest Plus is now helping farmers in other countries. In India, the group is helping farmers grow iron-rich millet. And in Bangladesh, it is helping farmers grow high-zinc rice.
57.
No more TV dinners. No more snacking with Paul McCartney on the kitchen stereo. And certainly no listening to the more intellectual bits of Radio 4 over breakfast. If you want to lose weight, the best accompaniment to a meal is the sound of your own chewing, a study suggests. Psychologists in the U.S. have found that people consume less food when they can hear themselves eating. They believe the effect to be so powerful that even simply telling somebody that they are eating a crunchy snack makes them eat less. In a considerable benefit to those who cannot get through a packet of crisps without making the noise of a small gunfight, experiments show that the more people concentrate on the noise of their meal, the less they eat, and they think the flavors are more intense. Gina Moore, assistant professor of marketing at Colorado State University, said the findings suggested that people who wanted to diet could cut down on distracting sounds. In one experiment, Dr. Moore and a colleague asked 71 students to sit in a room with a bowl of 10 pretzels while wearing a pair of headphones. Half of the participants had their ears flooded with white noise, drowning out the sound of their chewing. They ate an average of 4 pretzels each. The other half, who were able to hear themselves eat much more distinctly, took 2.8 each.
58.
The marketing psychologists also sat 156 undergraduates down in a room with 8 baked crackers made from pita bread. One group read a piece of paper that said, "Our pita crackers deliver the crunch you crave. You'll love the crispy sound of each bite." They each ate an average of 1 fewer than the other group, who were shown an instruction that emphasized the taste instead. The researchers believe that food manufacturers have long understood this phenomenon. When the company behind the Magnum brand of ice creams changed their chocolate coating to stop it slipping off the bar, they were inundated with complaints. It eventually emerged that people had largely been buying the bars precisely because they liked the brittleness of the chocolate and crackling noise it made when they ate it. To our knowledge, this relationship had not been examined in existing research, despite the importance that food sound has in the consumer environment, the authors wrote in the journal Food Quality and Preference.
59. When it comes to eating, the United States has a lesson to learn from France. I'm not talking about the kind of elaborate dinners Americans often associate with the French. Many of the meals the French eat are quick and simple. The difference is that the French eat together. They have managed to preserve a tradition that is good for everyone's health, the family meal. According to the French government's Committee for Health Education, 75% of the French eat dinner together as a family, and many French school children still go home for lunch. These figures haven't changed much in decades. In the United States, on the other hand, national studies show that on average, only 1 family in 3 sits down for dinner together on a daily basis. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a steady decline in the number of American families that eat together regularly. It looks like the family meal is disappearing. 60. How and why did the family meal start to disappear in the United States? My friends in the United States have various explanations why meals together aren't an option for their families. Parents and children lead hectic lives, and there just isn't time for a sit-down meal. Kids' sports schedules run on into dinner hour. After a long day at work, parents are too tired to cook. Teenagers are off on their own after school. Everyone likes different foods, they say, so what is the point of eating together? Yet, study after study shows that having meals together as a family is good for both adults and children. A University of Michigan study found that mealtime at home was the single strongest factor predicting better achievement scores and fewer behavioral problems for children. Mealtime was far more powerful than time spent in school, studying, worshiping, playing sports, or doing arts activities. Other studies show that children like family meals. In one report, nearly 4/5 of adolescents cited eating dinner at home as one of their top-rated family activities. In a national YMCA poll in 2000, when teenagers were asked about their worries, 21% rated not having enough time with parents as their top concern. 61.
A modern supermarket is a thing of wonder. Even if it's snowing outside and summer is a distant memory, you can buy strawberries, peaches, or grapes. If you want root vegetables in the middle of a heat wave, you can have them. Expat Americans can have their Oreo cookies, while homesick New Zealanders can console themselves with wine and kiwi fruit. Within days of being picked off the vines, the fruit is in your trolley, tasting of spring as the leaves are falling outside. It's all great until you start contemplating the vast mileage sitting in your shopping basket. Those kiwi fruits have traveled nearly 20,000 kilometers, or 12,000 miles. They've flown in a plane and traveled by road. By the time they reach the supermarket, they're responsible for 5 times their own weight in greenhouse gases being pumped into the atmosphere. Increasingly, our food is coming from further and further away, and we're becoming more and more dependent on the fuel it takes to get them to us.
62.
This dependence was illustrated very clearly during the September 2000 fuel price protests in Britain. Inspired by similar actions in France, a group of farmers and lorry drivers decided to blockade the Stanlow oil refinery in Cheshire. The protest quickly snowballed, and petrol tankers were unable to leave refineries. Panic buying saw more than 90% of petrol stations run dry. And with supplies unable to get through, supermarket shelves quickly emptied. It's estimated that food now accounts for as much as 40% of all UK road freight, and the international food trade is increasing faster than the world's population and food production. In other words, food is moving around more than ever, and the environmental impact could be huge. Despite the UK's cool climate being perfectly suited for growing apples, nearly 3/4 of the apples eaten in the UK are imported, and more than 60% of Britain's apple orchards have been destroyed in the past 30 years. We're now putting more energy into transporting some crops than we get out of eating them. For every calorie of lettuce imported to the UK from America's west coast, 127 calories of fuel are used. Put it another way, flying over a kilogram of Californian lettuce uses enough energy to keep a 100-watt light bulb glowing for 8 days.
63.
One of the most popular ways to demonstrate this year's severe U.S. winter appeared to be tossing out a glass of boiling water and watching it freeze instantly in mid-air. Of course, the reason the fun experiment impressed viewers is because nobody expects boiling water to turn to ice that quickly. It turns out that, contrary to intuitive thinking, it actually freezes faster than cold water. Why? That's a mystery still waiting to be solved. While this phenomenon has been observed for thousands of years, it was brought to the world's attention in 1963 by Tanzanian high school student Erasto Mpemba. It all began when the young boy was learning to make ice cream in cooking class. After dissolving the sugar in boiling milk, the students were instructed to allow the mixture to cool down before putting it in the ice cream churner. Too impatient to wait, Mpemba put his mixture in while it was still hot. To his and everyone's surprise, his ice cream was the first to freeze. His explanation appeared so unbelievable that even his teacher thought Mpemba must be mistaken.
64.
Convinced that he had discovered something, Mpemba told a visiting physics professor about his accidental experiment. Like his teacher, the professor was a little doubtful, but invited him to test the theory. The two began by filling 100 milliliter beakers with 70 milliliter samples of water of varying temperatures and placing them in the icebox of a normal refrigerator. What they noticed was that it took longer for the water to freeze when the temperature was at 25 degrees Celsius than when it was at a much hotter 90 degrees Celsius. Since then, the phenomenon has been known as the Mpemba effect. However, while the two were able to demonstrate it, neither could find a scientific explanation for why it occurred. Over the years, researchers have come up with several theories. The theory that most believe is fairly straightforward. It is a known fact that hot water evaporates faster than cold. Hence, when boiling water is tossed into cold air, some of it turns into steam and disappears, leaving behind less to turn to ice. Sounds plausible, right? In fact, Mpemba had thought of this possibility and even tested it. Unfortunately, he found no difference in the volumes of the ice formed at different temperatures.
65.
A more recent scientific study conducted by Zai Zhang at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore attributes the phenomenon to the chemistry between the hydrogen and oxygen molecules that make up water. The researcher believes that as the temperature rises, it provides the molecules with a lot of pent-up energy. When this water is tossed into a cold environment, the energy jumps out in a way similar to how a highly compressed spring would when released. This results in the hot water cooling down much more rapidly than cold water, which does not contain as much energy. While all these theories are plausible and explain the phenomenon under certain conditions, none seems to provide a satisfactory universal solution to this strange physical property that has confused scientists since Aristotle observed it in 380 BCE.
66.
Even with the hard work and caring of many dedicated teachers and concerned parents, the U.S. continues to have a reading problem. According to the National Center for Educational Information, 38% of fourth-grade students cannot read and understand a short paragraph of the type found in a simple children's book. Results from a 1998 study showed that 60% of U.S. teenagers could comprehend specific facts, but fewer than 5% could elaborate on the meanings of the material read. No wonder many parents are discouraged, but they needn't be. By doing simple things like reading to their child, sharing their thinking about what they read, and telling their child stories, they can help develop the foundation needed for children to become good readers and learn that reading is not a chore, but a lifetime adventure.
67.
Good readers follow a number of key strategies, whether they're reading a magazine or a textbook. Firstly, they create a wide range of mental and visual images as they read, to feel involved with what they are reading. Then, they use their background and relevant prior knowledge before, during, and after reading to enhance their understanding of what they are reading. They also make and ask questions before, during, and after reading to clarify meaning, make predictions, and focus their attention on what's important. Good readers infer and determine the most important ideas or themes and distinguish between these and unimportant information. Next, they track their thinking while reading to get the overall meaning. Finally, if they have trouble understanding specific words, phrases, or longer passages, they use a wide range of problem-solving strategies, including skipping ahead, rereading, asking questions, using a dictionary, and reading the passage aloud to fix up their understanding. Reading is fundamental to success in life. It's that simple. Reading opens the door to virtually all other learning. You have to be able to read to learn mathematics, science, history, engineering, mechanics, political science, not to mention to surf the web or figure out how to operate that new DVD player. Basically, you have to be able to read to succeed.
68.
How would you feel if a robot looked after your child? Worried? Anxious? What if that robot was as intelligent as yourself, if not more so, and was able to react to every problem and whim without ever tiring or wanting to scream? For those studying and working in artificial intelligence, AI, Creating this kind of situation could so easily become a reality. AI is embedded in many educational applications, explains Janet Reed, a professor in child-computer interaction at the University of Central Lancashire, pointing to new gesture recognition and interpretation technologies. Brain-computer interfaces are detecting mood and emotion, and in the near future, robotic and virtual systems might be able to partially take on the care of children.
69.
AI is one of the most exciting fields of technological study, giving computers the ability to think, learn, and adapt when faced with a host of data. But it is not a technology of the future. It is all around us today, pervading our everyday lives and allowing us to take advantage of image and voice recognition software, intelligent web searching, and medical advances. The latter made possible thanks to robot scientists formulating hypotheses and interpreting data. Modern video games use AI to generate intelligent behavior in non-player characters. NASA's Mars rover was designed to make its own decisions, stopping and analyzing only the rocks it felt would be useful. And more is to come, with driverless cars and intelligent home systems on their way. As a result, many universities have been promoting AI courses and modules for both undergraduate and postgraduate students. Each of them requires a solid background in computing, maths, and physics, and explores knowledge representation, planning, and learning. Studying AI is perfect for students who can solve problems in abstract ways and devise new angles, says Dr. Richard Watson, senior lecturer in electronics and computer science at the University of Southampton. But AI is also about learning techniques of advanced computer science, so students should have a broad education in computer science before they tackle it. For that reason, very few undergraduate degrees will concentrate entirely on AI. Instead, it tends to be offered as modules within an overall computer science degree.
70. Neglect of the mind-body link by technological medicine is actually a brief aberration when viewed against the whole history of the healing art. In traditional tribal medicine and in Western practice from its beginning in the work of Hippocrates, the need to operate through the patient's mind has always been recognized. Until the 19th century, medical writers rarely failed to note the influence of grief, despair, or discouragement on the onset and outcome of illness, nor did they ignore the healing effects of faith, confidence, and peace of mind. Contentment used to be considered a prerequisite for health. The modern medicine man has gained so much power over certain diseases through drugs, however, that he has forgotten about the potential strength within the patient. One elderly physician friend recently told me of reading the diary of his uncle, also a doctor. In the early years, the diarist always recorded what happened to the individual or the community prior to an illness or epidemic. But as medicine became more technological, this part of the history grew less and less important to him, and finally was omitted altogether. Awareness of the mind's powers was lost as medicine cast out all soft data, the information that's not easily quantified or scientific.